first key point centers around the idea of strategic silence over reactive retaliation. In a world that constantly rewards the fastest reaction, the quickest counterattack, and the most immediate show of strength, what we see revealed in Operation Besharat Fatah is something far different and far more rare. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps did not respond to the strikes on impulse. There was no rushed retaliation. Instead, there was observation, silence, preparation, and only then action. In this, we begin to see a deeper wisdom at play, one that mirrors the ancient teachings that mastery over the self must come before mastery over the moment. For months prior to the US strike, surveillance drones, human intelligence networks, and cyber monitoring tools were activated by Iranian forces. They absorbed movements, recorded flight patterns, gathered structural layouts of the Qatar Air Base, and watched as foreign power projected itself across their regional skies. But they did not respond immediately. And therein lies the key. A mind not yet matured will seek to shout over a voice it dislikes. A spirit still controlled by pride will throw punches before understanding the opponent. But one who has cultivated patience, who has sat long in the discipline of observation, understands that power is not just in action, but in timing. The operation was reportedly formed over a foundation of quiet resolve. There were no grand declarations beforehand, no bluster. It was only when the pieces were aligned, only when intention and capacity merged, that the response was initiated. In this, we are reminded that silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. Silence is not surrender. It is awareness. Just as in training the body, one does not punch before learning how to root their stance. Just as one does not shout before they understand the weight of their words, nations too must learn the virtue of stillness before reaction. What the Irgc demonstrated, whether we agree with their motives or not, is a method that carries ancient echoes. Strategy is not born in the fire of chaos, but in the still water of clarity. Their operatives reportedly moved quietly, gathering evidence, mapping targets, building a structure of resistance, not through noise, but through structure. And structure is only possible when emotion is not the leader. What they exhibited was the manifestation of years of cultivated discipline, likely shaped by ideological commitment, but also by a belief that force without form is useless. The first step in any confrontation is always internal. The world tends to think in external terms: military power, alliances, weapons, air bases. But the true battlefield always is within. And this applies not only to nations, but to each of us. Before we speak in anger, before we respond to insult, before we strike in fear, we are given a small space, a gap. That space is our test. And in that gap lies either our destruction or our strength. The same gap is what the Irgc operated within. They waited, not because they were afraid, but because they had trained themselves to delay until the right moment arrived. Just like a warrior does not unsheath his sword until he is certain of his enemy's intentions, they held their hand until strategy, observation, and timing aligned. In the days following the US strikes, many expected an immediate reprisal. But what came instead was silence, and within that silence, preparation. Their drones reportedly hovered in the outer perimeter of US assets for weeks, mapping the architecture of their opponent's confidence. This is not the action of the impulsive, it is the action of the studied. There is something powerful in waiting, not out of fear, but out of strength. Only the strong can wait. The weak must always act immediately to prove they are not afraid. The strong already know. we are taught that in combat, the one who strikes first does not always win. Often, the one who strikes last and with precision holds the greater power. This is not about agreeing with the geopolitical motivations behind Iran's operation. Rather, it is about recognizing the deeper current that moves through such choices. There is spiritual discipline even in the art of warfare. The ones who endure are not the loudest, but the most aligned with clarity. In many disciplines, including martial and spiritual, it is taught that the hand moves after the breath is calm, that decision is made after the emotion is still, that one must be as certain of the consequences as they are of the intent. The IRGC's behavior appears to follow this rhythm. They had the means to respond sooner. They chose not to. Why? Because they were not yet finished seeing. In our own lives, how often do we respond before we've seen the full picture? How often do we react without first understanding? The operation teaches us symbolically that a response shaped in silence can be more potent than one shaped in fury. When the IRGC finally released the details of Besharat Fatah, it was not framed as revenge, it was shared as revelation. Their tone was calculated, the details meticulous. They spoke of signal interception, drone footage, base layout, and intelligence collection as if describing the alignment of a puzzle, not the wrath of a nation. This is another sign of restraint. It is not only the act that matters, but the spirit in which the act is carried out. And it is in this spirit that one finds the power of restraint over reaction. In the final measure, it was not their weaponry that shocked the world, it was their composure. That composure came from silence, that silence came from discipline, and that discipline came from years, perhaps decades, of internal structure being built before external movement could ever take place. The world is noisy, the world is reactive, the world is taught that speed equals strength, but those who walk the path of mastery, of self, of nation, of purpose, know that true strength is slow. It is steady, it is unshakable, not because it is loud, but because it is rooted. This is the lesson of strategic silence over reactive retaliation. It is the first step, the first discipline, and perhaps the only real difference between war and wisdom. Operation Besharat Fatah is not merely a military maneuver. It is a declaration of ideology, a spiritual gesture masked in strategic movement. When the IRGC revealed the inner architecture of their response to the US strikes launched from Qatar's Air Base, they were not merely explaining a counterattack, they were unveiling a symbolic act. To them, this operation was not just about missiles or intelligence, it was about identity. It was about drawing a line that says, here we stand, and beyond this you cannot pass without consequence. In every culture and every civilization, there comes a moment where symbolism surpasses logic, where the purpose of an action is no longer tactical, but philosophical. This is one such moment. In their own narrative, the IRGC did not just retaliate to defend territory, they retaliated to protect dignity. They did not just send signals to Washington. They sent signals to every individual who watches the balance of global power and wonders if the voice of the weaker side will ever be heard. Their message was clear. Silence does not mean surrender, and symbolism often weighs more than steel. The name itself, Besharat Fatah, the good news of victory, was chosen not at random, but with intention. It draws from Quranic language, evoking the tone of divine favor and prophetic destiny. It is a gesture of defiance cloaked in spiritual meaning, To those who carried out the operation, the choice of name affirms their belief that they are acting not merely for geopolitical gain, but as vessels of a higher cause. Whether or not one agrees with that cause is beside the point. What matters is how that belief transforms a strategic action into a sacred ritual. And herein lies the lesson. When an individual or a group sees their cause as sacred, they will endure greater suffering, train with more discipline, wait with more patience, and strike with deeper precision. It is not the tools in their hands that grant them strength, it is the fire in their spirit. Symbolism in this context is not decoration. It is the core. It gives shape to action and memory to the moment. We must remember that in the language of resistance, symbolism becomes the weapon of the seemingly outmatched. When armies are unequal, when technologies differ, when economies are imbalanced, then the battleground of meaning becomes the true frontline. A drone can deliver a payload, but a symbol can deliver resolve. A missile can destroy a building, but a story can sustain generations. This operation is that story. The IRGC claimed to have targeted systems, not people, to have aimed at function, not flesh. Whether this is propaganda or truth, it still presents a frame that matters. That this was not a strike of rage, but one of clarity. That this was not intended as chaos, but as communication. In their narrative, it was a warning wrapped in discipline. And such gestures are intended to teach, not just to harm. They are intended to say, you may have more, but we have meaning. You may fly higher, but we endure longer. You may strike first, but we will strike deeper. The world, however, often fails to understand symbolism when it wears military clothing. It looks only at casualties, blast radii, tactical outcomes. But those who study inner power know that symbols govern nations more than laws. A flag, a martyr, a verse, a historical date, these shape collective memory. And from memory, movements are born. The IRGC's operation must be seen through this lens, and not only as a political maneuver, but as a statement. We have endured, we will endure, and we will do so not only with weapons, but with conviction. What gives a person or nation longevity in the face of adversity is not their arsenal. It is their ability to derive meaning from suffering, structure from chaos, and pride from loss. That is the architecture of resilience. That is what transforms a counterstrike into a symbol of identity. When the IRGC publicly declared the contents of the operation, how it was built, how the surveillance unfolded, how they met the US presence, they did not speak with vengeance. They spoke with clarity. This is what we did. This is how we did it. This is why we did it. It was not just the disclosure of strategy. It was the declaration of a worldview that places honor, sacrifice, and faith at the center of response. It was, in a deeper sense, an invitation to understand, and yet so few will pause to receive that invitation. The eyes of the world are trained to look for explosions, not meanings. They are taught to examine the tool, not the intention. But those who seek deeper wisdom will always ask, why was this done? Not just how. And from that inquiry, one begins to see that the operation was not just about asserting power, it was about affirming identity. In our own life, symbolism plays the same role. It is the ritual behind the movement, the meaning behind the gesture. A bow before a practice, a deep breath before a challenge, the lighting of a candle before meditation. These acts transform space into sacredness. Likewise, Operation Besharat Fatah transformed military action into a national ritual of self-affirmation. He told a story that transcends politics, a story that says, though outnumbered, we will not be silent. Though targeted, we will not vanish. Though isolated, we will not forget who we are. This is not unique to Iran. Every people who have faced occupation, pressure, or foreign domination have drawn upon symbolism to sustain their cause. It is the light that warms the cold nights of resistance. It is the light that reveals direction when strategies grow dark. And in the hearts of those who carried it out, this operation will become more than a tactical chapter, it will become a spiritual verse. The world will continue to debate whether this was wise or foolish, justified or provocative. But those debates miss the inner core. The core is that this act has now become a reference point, a milestone in the narrative of defiance. And that is what those who master inner understanding must observe. What gives power to people who are pushed to the margins is not the size of their army, it is the depth of their belief. What gives strength to a gesture like this is not the immediate result, but the way it deepens the roots of collective identity. In this way, we learn that even amid missiles and maneuvers, what truly moves people is meaning. What sustains them is memory. And what gives birth to resilience is ritual. That is the symbolism in resistance. That is the heart of Operation Besharat Fatah. The conflict between Iran and the United States, and specifically the unfolding around Operation Besharat Fatah, reflects a much deeper confrontation than one limited to weapons, aircraft, or intelligence. It is a confrontation between two worldviews. One rooted in domination and projection of force, the other steeped in ideological preservation and spiritual endurance. At its core, this confrontation mirrors an internal struggle that every person, every society, and every leader must eventually face. It is the battle between the desire to control and the wisdom to understand. In the case of the United States, the decision to launch strikes from Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar reveals a mindset focused on intervention, assertion, and dominance. It is the belief that through force, through speed, through strategic advantage, a desired outcome can be enforced. It is the belief that through force, through speed, through strategic advantage. But history has repeatedly shown that dominance, when exercised without understanding, creates resistance, not resolution. The IRGC's response, detailed with surgical precision in the wake of those strikes, was not merely a retaliatory military action. It was a philosophical answer to a system that attempts to dictate the future of others through control. Their detailed surveillance, the precision of their targeting, the calmness of their communication. These are not merely tactics. They are reflections of a worldview that seeks to respond, not merely react. The danger of domination is that it breeds blindness. When a nation believes it holds superior intelligence, firepower, and alliances, it often begins to ignore the signs that it is becoming disconnected from reality. Control replaces listening. Speed replaces thoughtfulness. Noise replaces truth. This kind of power is fragile because it constantly needs validation through action. The one who seeks control must always do more, prove more, show more. But the one who seeks understanding needs only to see. The IRGC waited, they watched, and they saw. Their response was not an attempt to match the military scale of the United States. That would be a miscalculation. Instead, they chose to confront power not with more power, but with meaning. Their operation was a message, not just a maneuver. It was a call to the world that domination can be challenged, not by equal might, but by unshakable presence. In this way, they shifted the battlefield from the realm of jets and missiles to the realm of narratives and ideology. When the human mind is driven by the desire to control, it loses touch with the fluidity of life. It becomes rigid, brittle, and insecure. Such a mind reacts with aggression when questioned, with violence when threatened, and with denial when proven wrong. This is true not only for nations but for individuals, and the global arena reflects this pattern. The United States has grown accustomed to define its role as the shaper of world order. Assuming its military superiority gives it the right to decide what is right. Yet this belief system often fails to perceive the full picture. It mistakes silence for weakness, restraint for fear, and endurance for incapacity. The Iranian response through Operation Besharat Fatah shattered that illusion. It showed that even those who appear isolated or marginalized may hold a deeper understanding of timing, purpose, and execution. It revealed that the ability to understand one's enemy, to interpret their movements, to anticipate their assumptions, this is a form of power that does not need noise to be heard. In spiritual disciplines, we are often told that the mind must become still before it can perceive the truth. The one who dominates may see only what he wants to see, but the one who understands sees what is truly there. The world needs more understanding and less domination, more listening, less speaking, more reflection, less assertion. The IRGC, in revealing the details of their operation, demonstrated not only that they had seen through the layers of their adversary's plan, but that they were capable of holding back their response until it could teach a lesson. That lesson is clear. When domination becomes the goal, understanding is lost. And when understanding is lost, collapse is not far behind. What we often miss in analyzing military movements and geopolitical events is the emotional and psychological framework from which they arise. The US military action from Qatar was not simply about neutralizing threats. It was about reaffirming superiority. It was an attempt to reassert control in a region that continuously eludes permanent control. But true influence is not sustained through fear, it is sustained through respect. And respect is born from understanding. No empire, no matter how powerful, can endure without wisdom. And wisdom does not arise from the desire to dominate, it arises from the willingness to see others not as obstacles to be crushed, but as mirrors from which one may learn. Iran's message through this operation is rooted in that principle. We have watched you, we have studied you, and now we respond not to destroy, but to remind. A global order built on domination will always eventually turn against itself. When one nation seeks to impose its will on others, resistance becomes inevitable. And resistance, when forged in purpose, is far more dangerous than any fleet of aircraft. Purpose endures. It transforms pain into fuel, isolation into focus, surveillance into patience. That is what we are witnessing now, the shift from domination to confrontation, not through the typical means of war, but through the use of intelligence, precision, and message. This is not only a political phenomenon, it is a spiritual one. Because at the deepest level, every attempt to dominate another is an admission of insecurity. Only those who fear the loss of control seek more control. Only those who are uncertain within themselves feel the need to suppress the voices of others. This principle holds true in human relationships, in politics, and in international affairs. What would happen if domination were replaced with dialogue? If force were replaced with inquiry? If the urge to act were replaced by the discipline to observe? This is the path that leads to resolution. The IRGC did not claim to have neutralized the United States. That was never their goal. Their goal was to show that understanding creates leverage, that when you truly see your opponent, you no longer need to overpower him. You only need to reveal his blindness. That is what Besharat Fatah did. It lifted the veil on a cycle of aggression and revealed a deeper truth, that understanding, quiet, disciplined, patient understanding is a form of strength that cannot be intercepted or bombed. We must look beyond the immediate events and see the principles they illuminate. This operation teaches that knowledge, when guided by intention and grounded in meaning, becomes more effective than brute strength, and that the desire to dominate must always be met with the courage to understand, for only understanding can prevent the wheel of conflict from turning endlessly, and only understanding in the end can guide the world away from collapse and toward clarity. When news emerges of airstrikes, operations and retaliations between major powers, it is easy for the observer to get caught in the drama, the fear and the political noise. Yet, in moments such as these, when the IRGC reveals the full scope of Operation Besharat Fatah in response to the US strike from Qatar's Al Udeid Air Base, what is often missing is the individual response. Not of politicians, not of commanders, but of those watching silently from across the globe. The inner world of the individual is rarely discussed, but it is the foundation of how the outer world is shaped. What we witness in the news is not isolated. It connects to the collective vibration of human thoughts, emotions, and choices. When the world reacts in fear, it reinforces fear. When we respond with blame or anger, we become a part of the same cycle that fuels conflict on national levels. And yet, when we choose stillness, awareness, and personal accountability, we begin to shift that cycle, not through force, but through frequency. As Operation Besharat Fatah was revealed in its precision and discipline, so too must the individual begin to reveal the state of their inner world. If the IRGC spent months in quiet observation, in delayed response, in disciplined strategy, can we not also take a moment to reflect before reacting? If they chose patience over impulse, intention over chaos, what does that say about the potential of those who are not bound by governments but live as free beings with the capacity for reflection? Every time we consume a headline and rush to judgment, we contribute to the energy of reaction. Every time we assign blame without seeking to understand the root, we add fuel to a global fire. The details of this operation point to a mastery of timing, a refusal to act out of rage, and a conscious effort to align thought, intent, and execution. That very discipline, when internalized on an individual level, can transform the way we live, the way we respond to conflict in our own lives, family tensions, workplace politics, societal injustice, either contributes to peace or to division. There is a universal law that says the state of the world is a mirror of the state of its people. So when global tensions rise, when wars are threatened, when operations unfold with deadly consequences, we must ask ourselves what energies we have cultivated within. Do we live with unresolved anger? Do we hold tightly to fear? Do we harbor thoughts of retaliation, of domination, of revenge? Or do we, like those who planned this operation, hold ourselves to a standard of discipline, allowing our inner chaos to settle before taking action? The IRGC did not strike blindly. They spend time watching, understanding, and preparing. And whether one agrees or disagrees with their philosophy, the principle of disciplined response is one that every individual can embody. In our everyday lives, we face situations that demand a reaction. But true strength is found in the ability to pause, to reflect, to see the bigger picture before making a move. Let the details of this operation remind us of the power of the unseen, the thoughts that are cultivated in silence, the awareness that forms in stillness, the actions that arise from a clear mind. What we do not realize is that the emotional energy we carry, especially in times of global conflict, has a ripple effect. Our thoughts are not contained within us. They are part of a shared field of consciousness. When we feed that field with anxiety, panic, or hatred, we are no different from those who launch missiles in the name of fear. But when we choose clarity, presence, and inner balance, we introduce a new vibration into that same field. The ripple begins at the center. The most potent form of protest is the refusal to be reactive. The most potent form of activism is conscious awareness. Ask yourself, when you read about the conflict, about the response from Iran, about the pressure between nations, do you respond with fear? Do you respond with tribal loyalty? Or do you respond with curiosity, seeking to understand the roots rather than judging the fruits? It is easy to pick a side, but growth lies in dissolving the walls between sides. The operation that was executed was not an act of random violence. It was a calculated decision, meant to communicate something. And if communication is at the heart of the act, then listening must be the response. How often do we truly listen to others, to ourselves, to the deeper currents flowing beneath the surface of events? In stillness we find the wisdom that noise can never provide. The world does not need more reaction. It needs more reflection. The way forward is not through domination or even resistance. It is through personal transformation. When individuals cultivate clarity, the collective begins to reflect it. When citizens of the world begin to embody the discipline they wish to see in their leaders, leaders are eventually shaped by that very energy. We are not powerless observers of these events. We are co-creators of the world that produces them. The US strike, the Iranian response, the ripple of consequences that follows, all of it is born from human thought, and thought can be transformed. The Irgc spent months preparing. They did not lash out, they waited for the right moment, not out of fear, but out of strength. Let this be a reminder that wisdom is not in how fast you act, but in how deeply you understand. In your life, when faced with conflict, will you strike immediately? Or will you wait? Will you act out of emotion, or will you act out of clarity? Transformation does not require massive gestures. It begins with simple practices: breath, observation, silence, intention. Just as the Irgc's operation unfolded after a long period of strategic discipline, your life can change when you apply the same principle. Wait until your mind is clear. Watch until you understand. Act when the time is right. And most of all, do not forget that your inner world is not isolated from the outer one. You are a participant in this shared experience. Every time you choose calm over chaos, presence over panic, understanding over anger, you change the energy of the planet. That is not a metaphor. It is truth. This is not just about Iran or the US or any geopolitical force. It is about how we as individuals respond to the presence of conflict in any form. It is about whether we will allow fear to shape us or whether we will shape ourselves through discipline. The great operations of the world may be carried out by soldiers, generals, or governments, but the great transformation of the world will be carried out by individuals, one breath at a time, one thought at a time, one moment of awareness that breaks the cycle of reaction and invites the presence of peace. The details of Operation Besharat Fatah are significant, not because of the military impact alone, but because of the example they offer in restraint, clarity, and timing. Let those same qualities live in you. Let your inner response to external chaos be your greatest contribution, for the true war is always within, and the true victory is mastery over self.